soldiers, and it would be phased over a few weeks, over the 6 weeks. Humanitarian aid would flood into the Gaza Strip, and in return, hundreds of Palestinian prisoners in Israeli jails would be set free. You know, that is what seems to have been very easy. Well, not very easy, but like that seems to have been agreed on. The sticking point comes down to this question of what happens to Israeli troops inside the Gaza Strip. And according to the framework we've seen, Israel has agreed on the idea that its troops should go withdraw from looks like out of one of the key areas, the Netzarim corridor, which is in central Gaza, running west to east across the access where Israel has throughout the war basically controlled the flow of people. And that relates to the key issue of whether or not Palestinians within Gaza would be able to flow freely back to their homes in northern Gaza if they wanted to under a deal. But the sticking point seems to be, and this is what we just don't have clarity, and we have confusion, to be honest, right now, whether or not Israel and Hamas have agreed on the idea of what happens in the Philadelphia corridor. Again, that strip of land running across the border between Gaza and Egypt. Israel and us repeatedly that is to prevent arms being smuggled from Egypt potentially back into Gaza if there is a ceasefire in place. And what we don't have clarity on is whether or not Hamas has accepted Israeli soldiers remaining in that corridor, or whether there is a different position the two sides have come together on. Diane?
Tom, what do you make of it? It looks like we have lost Tom Soufi-Burge. We will try to get him back, but again, some conflicting reports now of whether there is a ceasefire deal agreement now between Israel and Hamas. It seems regardless they are close. We will, of course, continue to keep you updated on this developing story as we get more. Right now, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, more on that potential ceasefire deal and confirmation hearings taking place right now on Capitol Hill. We'll be right back.
We are part of an operation.
Is this our combat operations center?
We're approaching the gate. Militants came in from different directions.
Nuclear reactor.
So you have a couple loaded and ready to go.
The house is destroyed, but the flag...
Not a tear in it.
How important it made the USA.
Great work.
Hi. Appreciate you. Thank you.
Ismail? David.
I'm David Muir.
I know who you are.
You
Watch
do?
you every night.
ABC's World News Tonight with David Muir is America's most watched newscast.
There's never been a path to a national championship like this. And in the end, one team will have done something no team has ever done. The College Football Playoff National Championship, Monday, January 20th, 7:30 p.m. on ESPN.
Here you leave today and enter
a world of galaxies.
A world of speed.
Flip other worlds.
For whatever you love, infinite worlds await.
Amanda Riley was a mother, wife. She got diagnosed with cancer.
There's all these pictures of her in the hospital with IVs, tubing.
But she was a liar.
Why would somebody fake cancer?
Scamanda premieres January 30th on ABC.
What's good to watch, read, and buzziest celebrity good stuff. Deals and steals with amazing savings and the coolest lifestyle tips from Good Morning America.
Get excited!
I love that so much. It's time for GMA Life.
Welcome back to ABC News Live. First, I'm Diane Macedo. We want to get to some important developments in the Middle East. Conflicting reports are coming out about whether Hamas has accepted a draft ceasefire deal that would release dozens of hostages as well as a 6-week ceasefire in Gaza. I want to bring in ABC News foreign correspondent Tom Soufi-Burge from Tel Aviv. Tom, what do we know about the state of this deal right now? Because it seems like some are...
To you right now, Diane, is that the AP news agency, which is very trustworthy, is saying Qatar and Hamas officials say a ceasefire agreement has been reached to pause Israel's war in Gaza and release dozens of hostages. That said, we're hearing in the last half an hour from an Israeli official saying that there is a Philadelphia corridor. That is the strip of land between Egypt and southern Gaza, running east to west right along where Israeli troops are based, and where the Israeli government in recent months has said they would not be willing to fully withdraw troops from because they want to prevent arms being smuggled back into Gaza under a potential ceasefire. So, you know, we are hearing multiple reports suggesting that, yes, Hamas have known in the last few hours and the last couple of days that from US officials and Israeli officials that, you know, this was into the end game, that, you know, the main points have been agreed on, that a 6-week ceasefire had been agreed on, the release of 33 hostages. That would be all of the female hostages held in Gaza right now, including the Israeli female soldiers, and that's an important point. It would entail soldiers. And, you know, it would mean a 6-week ceasefire, and it would mean flooding the Gaza Strip with humanitarian aid, and it would be a phased withdrawal of hostages. So we're thinking, and we've seen a draft example, 4 days later, 4 on day 3, sorry, and then 3 every week thereafter. So it wouldn't be a question of 33 released in one moment. And obviously that's what happened back in November and December of 2023, just after the war began, when there was that initial ceasefire agreement and dozens of hostages were released back then.
Tom, once they do reach an agreement, or let's say they have already, it still has to go through some approvals on the Israeli side.
From certain sources that the deal in principle was agreed upon, but then it was being passed via Israel's negotiating team in Qatar back to the Israeli Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu's team, and they were looking over it. And then we heard from an Israeli official that separating southern Gaza and Egypt. So, you know, yes, in terms of the Israeli government, we believe that if one dissenting voice, a hardline voice, the security minister here, Itamar Ben-Gvir, who has already in the last few days spoken out against the deal, but we expect it to be passed by the Israeli cabinet, and, you know, yes, the Israeli government is a coalition, and Itamar Ben-Gvir's party is part of that coalition. Whether or not the coalition will hold together in the long term, I think that's hard to say. Whether it will in the near term, it's likely. On is whether or not Hamas and Israel have agreed on what happens to Israeli troops once this 6-week ceasefire kicks in. And at the moment, we don't have clarity on that. And I think that has been the sticking point for months, and that is what we're trying to work out right now.
Tom, an Israeli source with direct knowledge of the negotiations also said they hit a snag over what they called new demands regarding the Philadelphia axis. Why is that such an important factor here?
It's really important from the Israeli government's perspective, be able to prevent arms potentially being smuggled in from Egypt into Gaza, arms which would end up in the hands of Hamas. Now, other people say, well, you know, Israel has controlled that corridor for a long period of time, and there are dissenting voices in Israel about this. I mean, a few months ago when I was here, IDF figures were coming out and suggesting that actually Israel could be on the edge of that strip of land and quickly move into it on a case-by-case basis, and that ultimately they could prevent any Hamas activity in that area, but they wouldn't just need to be there as a permanent presence. So that, you know, there were voices in Israel that were saying, look, there are creative solutions to this. We don't have to have a sort of hard and fast position on it. As far as I'm aware, and from the conversations I've had with Israeli officials, the Israeli government's position has not changed, that they still believe that they need really much mention of the Philadelphia corridor, to be honest. So it doesn't clarify it, but it doesn't actually say. It talks about Israeli troops withdrawing from populated areas, and even from this other contentious area of land, the Netzarim corridor, again, a strip of land running west to east, right across Gaza, but it's right up in central Gaza. And in the draft agreement is also key, because under this agreement, there would be the free flow of Palestinians north to south, which isn't the case during the war. That is strictly controlled by the Israeli military. But under the agreement, the idea is that Palestinians would be able to go back to their homes in the north, what's left of their homes, by anyone potentially affiliated to Hamas making that journey. There are unconfirmed reports tonight that the Qataris and potentially the Egyptians could be part of that solution in terms of policing that corridor up in central Gaza. But again, the main sticking point right now, and the piece of or not Israeli troops are fully withdrawing from that, and if they're not, has Hamas accepted that as a part of the deal, which months ago it was not willing to do? Diane?
And Tom, the incoming Trump administration takes office in just 5 days. How might that impact the timing of these negotiations? How do you think it's impacting it now, and how might it impact if they don't reach a final deal before then?
politically involved as well. And both teams are telling us that they are working hand in hand to push this deal over the line. Look, President-elect Trump's inauguration in a few days' time is definitely a sort of unofficial deadline, because President-elect Trump has said on 2 occasions that all hell would break loose in Gaza if there wasn't a deal. Now, we don't know exactly what he means by that. I spoke to a former Israeli general close to the Israeli government in the last few days, who suggested to me that, it could mean Israel going to try and annex some of the occupied West Bank, for example. Now, that's just a theory, and that former Israeli generals seem to be speculating on that, because other people have pointed out, well, there is already hell in Gaza, dire living conditions, disease, lack of water, scarcity of food. So, some people have said, well, how can Gaza get worse? How can there be hell in Gaza? There already is. But, some other people have suggested that suggestion
of hostages being held right now by Hamas. The Biden administration says there are 7 American hostages still in Gaza. At least 3 of them are believed to be alive. Officials say that Hamas has agreed to release 2 of them in the initial weeks of the ceasefire. In exchange, Israel will release hundreds of Palestinian prisoners. Israel will also pause fighting so desperately needed aid can finally get into Gaza. With just days left in, working closely with President-elect Donald Trump's Mideast negotiator to broker this deal. Trump has been blunt, warning if these hostages are not back by the time he returns to office, that without hesitation, all hell would break out in the Middle East. Let's get straight to our foreign correspondent, Ian Pannell, with more. Ian, tell us what you know.
Yeah, Kira, that's right. We're now expecting a press conference to be held by the Qatari Prime Minister. Remember, the negotiations have been taking place in Qatar. Qatar has essentially hosted conversations, separate conversations that have been taken together with the Israeli hostage negotiators, and this is something the Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, has been working on for a long time. The details: this is a temporary ceasefire for now. Phase 1 would include the gradual release of hostages. We don't know the condition of those hostages. It's entirely possible that some of them will be dead, and it will be bodies that will be returned to their loved ones. In all, we're expecting in this first 42-day period, so 6 weeks, we're expecting a developing, evolving process whereby Hamas release for some Israelis here who are adamantly against this deal. It's something that Netanyahu's managed to get through his security cabinet, despite objections from some of the more hard, far-right members of the security cabinet. In terms of the process, so you have the 6-week process. There'll be movement of troops pulling back from certain areas, and as those stages develop, so that will eventually, assuming there are no breaches of the ceasefire, lead to a full withdrawal. There have been a lot of different elements that have proved controversial in this, but the headline is, brokered by the Biden administration, the incoming Trump team, Egypt, Qatar, and of course involving Israel and Hamas, is that there will be a ceasefire, which is clearly going to be great news for the population of Gaza. Remember, more than 46,000 people have been killed throughout this more than 15-month war. Obviously, hundreds of Israelis also killed on that October 7th attack, but also a number of Israeli soldiers also killed in the military operation that's been undergone in Gaza. It'll also lead to reconstruction, but it'll be great news for Israel. Clearly, amazing news for the Palestinians who've been stuck in Gaza in this living hell for so long now. We're still waiting for official announcements, though, to be clear. We need to hear that from the Qatari Prime Minister. We're expecting an announcement, probably hear something from the White House that once these other announcements have been made. But after such a long, painful period, for so many people in this region, it's going to be broadly welcomed. As I mentioned, there is even if it means not returning the hostages, not returning the bodies of those who've been killed, that the war should continue. I think one thing that we should really bear in mind is there are 3 phases prescribed in this text that we have been given access to. Again, we need to see it in the flesh when it's actually published. I feel that they should be the ones to run Gaza. That's a total non-starter for the Israelis. So in some senses, some of the really stickier points of this agreement have been kicked into the long grass, but they're going to have to be dealt with. While phase one is underway, negotiations have to start for phase two of the deal and then eventually for phase three. So it's a complicated process. I would say it's very fragile. A lot of people are hoping that the guns will fall silent, but we have to wait and see how it pans out and whether these negotiations can continue. Kira?
Ian, you mentioned the White House. Let's get straight to our chief White House correspondent, Mary Bruce. Mary, I'm seeing now that the president-elect has put it out on Truth Social. We have a deal for the hostages in the Middle East. They will be released shortly. Can now confirm has been involved in these negotiations. What are you hearing from the White House?
Well, look, this certainly is a deal that President Biden has worked for many, many months. This administration has been painstakingly trying to get this over the finish line, and it certainly was a top priority for President Biden to get this done before he leaves office now in just days. But we are also told that President Biden felt it was very important that there be very little daylight between his administration and the incoming Trump administration. Of course, they wanted to present a united message to negotiators. They also were well aware that any deal that was likely to be achieved would, of course, carry over into the next administration, bring in Steve Witkoff, the incoming administration's Middle East envoy, into these conversations. And President Biden himself has been deeply involved in all of this. He's been working the phones back here. He has spoken with Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu, the Qatari leader. He's spoken with President Sisi of Egypt in the last few days, making sure that he is obviously informed of all of this as well. But of course, the timing is certainly notable. It's hard to ignore the fact that this appears to be finally getting over the finish line with just days left in this administration. And as Donald Trump certainly has been upping the pressure, promising that all hell will break, will certainly allow both the current administration and the incoming administration to take some credit for this. We have not heard directly from President Biden yet. I suspect that certainly will change. Kira?
Mary, thank you. Let's get to our chief global affairs correspondent, Martha Raddatz. Martha, you have been to the region several times shortly after the attacks as well, have likely been through.
Well, Kira, I think it is astonishing still to go into those kibbutzes and see the damage and destruction that was caused in them and the lives that were taken and the hostages that were taken. I was there just days after the attack, remember, several of them dead in November. But for those families, when I visited again this last October, the first anniversary, there was one hostage family I spoke to. The brother, others were alive. It was the best day of his life. But since watching how some of those hostages have been treated and what they have been going 15 months later. And I do think those hostage families are feeling that today. Yes, there are several that are supposed to be alive, several dual citizens, 3 American-Israeli citizens, but there is always concern what shape they will be in, especially after these many, many months, to see where their loved ones were being held. Standing there with that brother and watching him look across there. He came to that kibbutz all the time just to think of his brother. So you have to think about what those hostage families are going through. But as Ian points out so well, you also have to realize what Palestinians, not closely of 90%, it is estimated, have been displaced. And again, Hamas says 46,000 have been killed. Kara?
Martha, thank you. Let's get right to our foreign correspondent, Tom Soufi-Burridge, on the streets of Tel Aviv. Tom, you have time and time again talked to the family members of these hostages. Have you been able to talk to any of them? But more importantly,
Defense forces are building up there, and you can see this demonstration there trying to close the traffic on this main route. But as you say, we've been here week after week after week, massive demonstrations in this area every weekend, really, for months. And that a deal has been signed off on by both sides, even though we haven't seen that formal agreement in writing. But, you know, there's clearly, I think there will be celebration. These people will be very happy that there's a deal. But there's a big but. The caveat, Kira, is that, you know, amongst the families of the hostages in Gaza, there is a fear that there will be this initial 6-week ceasefire, yes, but it won't potentially turn into a permanent ceasefire and still if there isn't a phase 2 and a phase 3. I mean, look, you can see there's hundreds of people. There's a lot of anger towards the Israeli government amongst this section of Israeli society, and they've remained determined throughout. So if this deal is again confirmed by the Israeli government and Hamas, then it will be a massive, massive, massive moment for the families. And yes, I have been speaking to 2 of the families of American hostages. There are, we believe, only 3 American hostages potentially still alive. This 6-week ceasefire and the deal, and that would be Keith Siegel. And I've been speaking to his brother Lee multiple times over the last few months, but we've been exchanging text messages tonight. And to be honest with you, right now they're on tenterhooks. They don't know, what quite to believe. And the reports in the last half an hour, to be honest with you, have been very confusing about saying there is a deal, there isn't a deal. Hamas might have made new demands, according to one Israeli official, related to control of this southern strip of land in Gaza, the border with Egypt, effectively. The father of Sagi Declerchen, he's in his 30s, he's got young kids just like me. And, I know Jonathan, again, is once again just watching everything, praying, hoping that this is the case, that there is a deal and that Sagi will be included. I think, what we do know from this draft negotiating framework we've seen is that elderly males like Keith Siegel, an American civilian, so he was not in the IDF on October the 7th when he was taken from the family kibbutz near Gaza. But, it's not 100%, that he would be in a deal. He could be, and we hope he will be. And US officials, from what they've been telling us, suggesting they hope that is the case too. So, I think this news is just coming through. You can see that people are still out on the streets.
Ian, I want to take it back to you. I understand now we have a statement from Hamas.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, it's a little vague, but it expresses positive tones towards what's been going on. They say the movement dealt with all responsibility and positivity based on its responsibility towards our patient and steadfast people in Gaza by stopping what they call the Zionist aggression against them. They say that they've given their full and official response, had some, but the official announcement should really come from the Qataris. I mean, it looks like that was hard to control. Just to let you know that the Israeli cabinet, security cabinet, is going to meet tomorrow to ratify this. It then has to go to the full cabinet. There's then a period of 48 hours to allow for any legal object of phase 1, possibly by the weekend, but we just have to wait and see. Kira?
Ian, thank you. Want to take you to live pictures now, just outside of a hospital there in Gaza. The last time there was a ceasefire, that was back in November of 2023. It lasted a very short time. It ended up falling apart. So what is going to make this deal so different this time around with so much destruction? And for this, and just talking about the future of Gaza now, what it could mean for the people, the humanitarian crisis, the aid that hasn't been allowed to get into the area, and also just the future of the Middle East now, as we're about to have a new administration leading our country. Steve.
Yeah, Kira, this is the first of several initial steps that had to be. Will Israel prevent another October 7th? Will they surround Gaza and it'll be very limited in the kinds of aid that they'll let come in? Who will run the rehabilitation and the reconstruction? Will it be the Qataris, the Egyptians? Clearly, the U.S. will have a role there. How much Arab money? And it'll be billions and billions, if not hundreds of billions of dollars to reconstruct Gaza. But the Israelis are not going to allow another October 7th. And so it'd be critical to figure out in the next set of negotiations, what does Gaza look like? Because that also means what does the new Middle East look like? Or less within Lebanon. And so the whole Middle East map is shifting here. And the final piece that needs to get put into place is what happens with the Palestinians, what happens with Gaza, and how does Israel deal with that, ensuring that October 7th never happens again.
From this deal that we are seeing so far, these various phases, Steve, will Gaza see immediate relief within this deal? When
the almost unimaginable destruction in Gaza, that's a lot of concrete. That's a lot of rebuilding. That's months. Getting in the kinds of capabilities to do that kind of rebuilding is going to take years. Gaza will probably not be where at least Gazans and the Palestinians want it. It'll be the Israelis probably are not going to be too favorable to Hamas coming back and controlling Gaza again. So how Hamas plays in the political development of Gaza, how the Israelis control that, what role the other Arab states, particularly the Qataris and the Egyptians have, are all questions to be determined, but they're critical for what becomes of the Middle East in the years to come.
And how exactly Hamas will take a role here? Will it stick to its word? Ian, panel, you're getting more from that side of things. What do you know?
Already know in this temporary ceasefire and this first tranche, what they're talking about is, firstly, the withdrawal of Israeli forces. Now, that will finally take place if we get into phase 3. That won't happen immediately, although there will be a relocation. A second opening of the crossings. This, of course, has been a critical issue. Humanitarian relief is very high on the agenda, almost simultaneously with this relocation of Israeli forces, but getting much-needed aid in. We've seen people have been forced to live rough, living in tents, the outbreak of disease, newborn babies dying, the hospitals have been decimated. So it really is absolutely critical to get that relief in there. Third, yes, to get relief and shelter for people. Of course, so many homes have been destroyed, so the need to start rebuilding to allow people to at least get indoors. Is the release of prisoners. Now, they're talking about the release of 1,000 Palestinian prisoners, including women and children under the age of 19, in exchange for negotiations will be completed in later stages. They also talk about the return of the displaced, freedom of movement, and then further negotiation process. So it's kind of what we thought it would be. Let's wait until we hear from Prime Minister Netanyahu for their take on it. I think it's reasonable to expect excuse me, there's going to be political spin from both sides because they have to sell it domestically. Neither side wants to admit that it's had to make concessions, but of course that is the reality. But I think it's really important to remember, as we've been discussing here, that there are some really thorny issues that are being kicked into the long grass. They're going to have to be dealt with in the coming weeks. And finding an agreement when Israel has vowed to crush Hamas, you're going to square that circle. Kira.
Ian, thank you. Let's get back to the streets of Tel Aviv, where we find our Tom Soufi Burridge. You've had a chance to talk with some people now as the news is spreading of this deal. Tom, tell us what they're saying.
Yeah, news is reaching these people now that definitely looks like there is a deal, and the U.S. government is telling us that. Look, I mean, you can see people are burning candles tonight, flames. I mean, have a look down here. Lukash, if you just move in, have a look. That writing there effectively says in Hebrew, they all have value. And I think that chimes with a message which we've been hearing from the forum supporting the families of the hostages, that, yes, of course, we're delighted if there's a deal and 33 hostages, most of them are believed to be still alive, but some of them at this initial 6-week ceasefire, and 33 hostages out in return for hundreds of Palestinian prisoners and other conditions might not actually lead to a second and a third phase of the deal. We're right outside the headquarters of the IDF. We've been in this location, Kira, on ABC News live many times. And come with me and just have a walk down the street, because this isn't a huge demonstration, but people have been building here, and obviously it's a weekday. And you can see people are now blocking the traffic. If you just come through here, excuse me, sorry. You'll see the buses are all stopped. So actually, I've seen this scene before when a deal didn't look imminent, but they're still blocking the traffic. They still want to make their point heard. And in terms of reaction from people in the crowd here, I've just had a chance to speak to. One guy said to me, I'll believe it when Prime Minister Netanyahu says it. He'll believe that there is. I said to me, yes, I'm delighted, but I'm fearful. And again, she's getting at that point, which they were making with the candle demonstration back over here, that, you know, they're worried about the fate of the other hostages. So just to recap, in terms of the hostages under the draft negotiating framework that we've seen, we're talking about 33 hostages, most of them believed to be alive. We're talking about all the child hostages, all of the female hostages, crucially including the female soldiers in amongst the hostages. You can hear the drums coming up as more people are moving down this. Soldiers who were taken on October 7th during that terror attack. So, look, I think there's a mixture of emotions here. People are happy. We're going to move away from the drums here. You can see it's always lively. These demonstrations are all lively. We'll keep on the side because the traffic is now moving again, thankfully for these people. But you can clearly sense that, yes, people are happy. This is a massive moment. Full image, if you come around here, of these candles, people holding a vigil. So, yes, the news is coming through to them that dozens of hostages, potentially up to 33, most of them alive, will be brought out of Gaza potentially in the next 6 weeks. But they are worried about the remaining hostages. And overall, there's thought to be just short of 100 hostages still in Gaza. Israeli officials have suggested to us that potentially about a third of them are believed to be dead. So it could mean that many more hostages...
Has long said their goal, or its goal, was to completely eliminate Hamas. So considering the deal that we are looking right now before us, is that off the table?
I think if you talk to certain members of Prime Minister Netanyahu's security cabinet, they will say, no, absolutely not. And they will want to retain the right to go after Hamas. And they also say very clearly that Hamas can't be part of what comes next in Israel. But it always struck me as a kind of unrealistic target to eliminate Hamas. Hamas is voted in by the people. A lot of people support the organisation, and eradicating it totally, even despite all the clashes still taking place. So there are still Hamas elements there. And as we've seen in other countries and other conflicts, at some point, even if they're categorised as terrorist organisations, conversations need to be had. So I think that's still a huge problem that is not going to go away. Everyone's just pushed it to one side for now in the interest of getting the guns to full silence, of getting the hostages out, for Hamas getting Palestinian prisoners home, but crucially relieving the thousands, hundreds of thousands of innocent Palestinians inside Gaza, to alleviate their suffering, allow them to go home, allow schools to sit, hospitals to reopen. The reconstruction cost is going to be enormous. When this is implemented, if all goes well on the Israeli side, we could see that first stage start by the weekend. Kira?
All right, Ian, thank you. Martha, just looking back at past administrations, all the way back to Jimmy Carter and his administration, and to put this together, how remarkable is that in your eyes?
It is remarkable. And of course, we were reminded of Jimmy Carter's hostage deal at his funeral recently last week. And one of the things that Jimmy Carter did was talk about the hostages in Iran and release those hostages until Ronald Reagan was sworn in. That was always a pain in the heart for Jimmy Carter, although he was thrilled that the hostages were eventually released. Now you have these two, President Trump's team and President-elect Trump's team and President Biden's team, working together to try to get this deal over the finish line. Certainly the pressure that Donald Trump had put on already, even before coming into office, probably had reminded of the effort that the Biden administration put into this deal. Constant shuttle diplomacy. As soon as the attack by Hamas on Israel happened, President Biden went over, he met with Netanyahu, and one of the things he said is, learn the lessons that we learned from 9/11. Don't go too far, essentially. Indeed, we assess that Hamas has recruited almost as many new militants as it has lost, and the Israelis estimate that there were 18,000 fighters lost. He said that is a recipe for an enduring insurgency and perpetual war. Those were the words that President Biden, Tony Blinken,
has haunted the last year in office for President Joe Biden. He now just has 5 days left before he leaves office. Let's get to the White House once again with our Mary Bruce. When do you think we'll hear from our president, Mary?
Well, Kira, I am told that we will likely hear from the president shortly on all of this. Now, no official comment from the White House just yet, but this was a top priority, if not the top priority, for the president in the remaining days of May when he first put forward this framework that was really the launching point for the agreement that we believe we are now going to see unfolding here. And the president, yes, he did feel very strongly that he work with the incoming administration on this, that there be no daylight between them, bringing in Donald Trump's envoy so that they could work on this together. We have, of course, seen Donald Trump already taking credit for this, calling the deal epic, saying, that it's an example of what he can achieve, saying, look what we've achieved, even before he's been able to take office. There will be plenty of time to unpack the Trump effect on all of this time with the families of the hostages, most recently in November, just after the election, promising them that he was going to do everything he could to bring them home.
Trump calling it epic. President Biden, no doubt, probably calling it quite a relief. And we will carry his remarks live, Mary, as soon as he begins talking. Our coverage continues on ABC News Live. I hope you will join me. Also, abcnews.com. David Muir will have complete wrap up on World News Tonight. I'm Kira Phillips. Glad you joined us.
This has been a special report from ABC News.
President shortly on all of this. Now, no official comment from the White House just yet, but this was a top priority, if not the top priority for the months. Of course, it was back in last May when he first put forward this framework that was really the launching point for the agreement that we believe we are now going to see unfolding here. And the president, yes, he did feel very strongly that he work with the incoming administration on this, that there be no daylight between them, bringing in Donald Trump's envoy so that they could work on this together. We have, of course, before he's been able to take office, there will be plenty of time to unpack the Trump effect on all of this, but there's no question that this current administration laid the groundwork, worked tirelessly on this, and of course, President Biden, for him, it is personal. He has spent a lot of time with the families of the hostages, most recently in November, just after the election, promising them that he was going to do everything he could to bring them home.
Trump calling, talking. Our coverage continues on ABC News Live. I hope you will join me. Also, abcnews.com. David Muir will have complete wrap up on World News Tonight. I'm Kira Phillips. Glad you joined us.
Ms. Sato, we have more now on that breaking news of a deal reached between Israel and Hamas. Phase 1 of that deal involves the release of dozens of hostages in exchange for a 6-week ceasefire in Gaza and the release of hundreds of Palestinian prisoners. 2 of those hostages being held by Hamas that would be released as part of this deal are Americans. That's the expectation, at least. Another American would be released in future phases of this deal, and the Israeli government is expected to approve the deal in the coming days. I want to bring in State Department reporter Shannon Kingston for more on that. Shannon, what
the last 96 hours, and U.S. officials in this building, they're still walking on eggshells, waiting for this to really be finalized. But they do expect to see in Segi Dekel Chen, 2 Americans that were kidnapped in October 7th, but they know they're leaving behind others. At least one of them is expected to be alive. That's Eden Alexander. He's not eligible for immediate release because he's a member of the IDF, so that's going to have to be negotiated down the line. And of course, there are the remains of 4 other Americans who are believed to have either died in camps. Welcome news. There's a lot that's going to happen. Of course, the implementation of this deal, it's not going to be easy.
No, I'm sure it's not. And I want to bring in senior White House correspondent Selena Wang, too, who's near Mar-a-Lago. Selena, President-elect Trump is taking credit for this deal on social media. What do we know about how the Biden administration and the incoming Trump administration took a role in these negotiations?
Yeah, Diane, President-elect Donald Trump already swooping in, taking credit for this deal, saying that it's an example of what his administration can accomplish before he's even taken office. But this is despite the Biden administration laying the groundwork here for months and months, trying to reach this deal. The president sending it. He told me that he's been working very closely with the Biden team on trying to reach this deal. He said that this isn't about who gets credit for getting the hostages out, that they are solely focused on the outcome here. But it is notable that Donald Trump is swooping in with this statement before we've heard yet publicly from President Biden himself. But the timing, of course, is notable here, given that we're just days away from Donald Trump's inauguration, that it is at this point that the deal that the Biden administration said they've been so close to reaching so many times, it is notable that it is now that we are finally reaching this deal. But I did speak to a senior Biden official just the other day who said that what makes this moment different from all the as well as militarily policy, and that is what is driving all of this towards that deal. But make no mistake, this is going to be a critical part of President Biden's legacy. This is something he vowed to do before he leaves office. He is accomplishing it, although at the 11th hour. And it's also deeply personal to President Biden, who has spent a lot of time with the families of these American hostages.
Gaza, you can see people celebrating there in the street. Let's go to Chief White House correspondent Mary Bruce, because, Mary, as Selena just pointed out, President Biden is expected to speak shortly here. It's interesting timing. As Selena said, a deal that the Biden administration has been working on for months, and yet also 5 days.
Look, first and foremost, I think the president is going to be celebrating the fact that this has finally gotten over the finish line. He has spent a lot of time with the families of the hostages. He has been negotiating this deal for months. He has been personally of Egypt, really trying to get this done. And the president, this was not just a top priority. It probably was the top priority for him in these final days of his administration. He wanted to get this done. But you cannot ignore the timing. It is impossible, promising that all hell would break loose if the hostages weren't released before he took office. But it was Joe Biden's decision and direction to bring in the Trump team to these negotiations. It was his decision to make sure that Steve Witkoff, Donald Trump's incoming Middle East envoy, was there at the table in these negotiations. He wanted to make sure that they were sending a united message for this. And you are already seeing that from the incoming president. Donald Trump has taken to social media saying this is an epic ceasefire agreement, that it could only have happened as a result of his historic victory. And he's holding it up as an example of what he is capable of accomplishing. I think there will be a lot of unpacking of what the true impact was of this change of administration on to get this done. And I think first and foremost, you will hear from the president just a big relief that finally, that these Americans will be coming home.
And we are looking live now at the streets of Tel Aviv. In Tel Aviv, Tom, how are people there responding?
I think there's a mix of emotions at this demonstration. We're right outside the headquarters of the IDF, Diane. I've been here on multiple occasions in recent months, demonstration after demonstration after demonstration. We've been having a breaking here. But to be honest with you, from talking to people in the last few minutes, they're pleased there's a deal. They're pleased there'll be this initial 6-week ceasefire, 33 hostages, most of them alive, released. But what they're worried about, let's move around here while the noise continues. What they're worried about, Diane, is that, the chants we've been hearing in Hebrew just now is now, like bring a deal now, but also another chant saying bring all of them home. Like people are celebrating, but they're also concerned, especially these people supporting the families, that this deal might not mean that all of the hostages get home, that after this initial 6-week ceasefire, there won't be a continuation and a second and third phase of the deal, because negotiations for that second phase will only begin once the initial ceasefire kicks in. Diane?
I know those families will be watching, and so will we. Selena Wang, Tom Sufi Burridge, Mary Bruce, Shannon Kingston.
This week only at Domino's, get unlimited mini-priced pizzas for 50% off when you order online. Choose any size pizza you want, any crust you want, and any toppings you want. Oh, and any number of pizzas you want, too. Get 50% off your perfect pizza, or pizzas, this week only at Domino's.
Bring home member deals to get more projects done and free standard shipping. Start earning for free with Milo's Rewards today.
I love winter forecasting. It's the reason I went into meteorology. As far as winter weather goes, I think the biggest thing for Chicagoans is commuting.
The thing that is consistently dangerous for us are winter storms. They can shut the city down at a moment's notice.
One of these days, we're getting another big blizzard, and we will be there ready to cover that when it's happening.
Keeping you up to date and prepared for impactful winter weather. That's what it means.
At Bombas, we make the most comfortable socks in the history of feet. So comfortable, you'll wish you had more. Visit bombas.com and get 20% off your first order.
The itch and rash of Rinvoq. Rinvoq is a once-daily pill that reduces the itch and helps clear the rash of eczema fast. clear skin.
Rinvoq can lower ability to fight infections. Before treatment, test for TB and do blood work. Serious infections, blood clots, some fatal. Cancers including lymphoma and skin, serious allergic reactions, GI tears, death, heart attack, and stroke occurred. CV event risk increases in age 50 plus with a heart disease risk factor. Tell your doctor if you've had these events. Infection.
Talk to your dermatologist about Rinvoq.
Learn how AbbVie can help you save.
Amanda Riley was a mother, wife.
Everybody loved her. I heard the words, "You have stage 3 blood cancer." We gave our hearts, our prayers.
We thought she was God's gift, but she was a liar.
Why would somebody fake cancer?
There's all these pictures of her in the hospital with IVs, tubing. It was only a matter of time until Amanda's whole world came tumbling down.
Oh my God! Scamanda premieres January 30th on.
When was the last time you saw Cal Bradford alive?
Agent Collins, have a seat.
I walked the president to his room at 2204.
When did you discover the body?
At 8:01, that's when I found him lying next to his bed.
Did you kill him?
No.
Is a part of you happy that Cal is dead?
I'm broke and I need a place to stay until I find a job. Can we try to talk to each other like rational adults?
Have you watched the news lately? That's not a thing anymore. You could go back to law school. That's always been your dream.
Actually, that was your dream for me.
You like to argue.
You do love to argue.
As long as we get paid for it.
Free. Let's solve this case.
Bingo. Our killer's name is Dubois.
Did you just Google who's the killer on your phone, Morgan?
No, I did not do that.
So what would you do?
I didn't think they were going to send me a female driver. I'm not getting in the car with you.
If you saw a
Are you going to be doing your makeup on the whole time?
would you step in?
You don't need to insult her.
Wait till you see what happens.
I just wanted to protect her. Women need to support other women.
So the question is, what would you do?
We are good drivers, by the way.
All new tonight on ABC. Whenever news breaks.
We are here in Israel, a nation at war after that brutal surprise attack by Hamas.
On the ground in
Dnipro, Ukraine. Reporting from the earthquake in Turkey.
In Rolling Fork, this tornado tore through this little town.
From the most devastating disaster in Hawaii.
From Charleston, South Carolina, on the 2024 campaign trail.
In Iceland, let's go.
Traveling with the president in Mexico City.
Wherever the story.
From the front lines. From southern Israel.
Outside wherever the story is.
Wherever the story is.
Wherever the story is, we're going to take you there.
You're streaming ABC News Live.
ABC News Live.
You're streaming ABC News Live.
ABC News Live. Streaming free everywhere. America's #1 streaming news.
Who is this guy?
He was kind of creepy. Pure evil.
We were shocked.
This is every woman's nightmare.
Belong to him.
They're mine. I'm more sane than most Americans.
This guy is an evil genius. He's the best serial killer that ever existed. He compared himself to Ted Bundy.
Wild Crime, 11 Skulls, only on Hulu.
After more than 15 months of fighting a breakthrough in the war in Gaza. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Kira Phillips. Israel and Hamas agreeing on the core elements of a ceasefire deal. Our foreign correspondent, also our other foreign correspondent, Tom Sufi-Burridge, he's in Tel Aviv. Our Martha Raddatz, chief global affairs correspondent, along with our White House correspondents, Karen Travers, with us. Shannon Kingston covers the State Department here in D.C. Also, our senior White House correspondent, Selena Wang, is coming to us out of Mar-a-Lago. Ian, let's get right to you and talk about the terms of this deal, the various phases, and what this...
A breakthrough, a significant moment. It's like the mood has lifted here, and clearly there are celebrations in Gaza where the suffering has been so deep and so great for so long. So, what's going to happen? We still have to wait for the Israeli Security Cabinet to meet tomorrow to ratify this, but it appears that the shape of a deal has been agreed. Hamas has released a statement emphasizing some parts of the deal. The Prime Minister's office here is also hinting at certain elements where there were disagreements. But in essence, what it's going to see over the first tranche, this is 42 days, 6 weeks, is that we're going to see 33 hostages. Not all will be alive, but certainly the bodies of those who've died, but most are expected to be alive. Implemented, we should see 3 hostages released in exchange for a large number of Palestinian prisoners. Hamas is talking about over 1,000 Palestinian prisoners in all. So as these phases go forward, we're going to see the slow pullback of some Israeli forces, allowing Palestinians to return to their homes, the borders opening up to these dying because their families are having to live in shelters, dying from the cold out there. The hospital system has been decimated. 90% of the population has essentially been driven from its home, and at least 46,000 Palestinians, more than 46,000, have paid the ultimate price. Medical publication The Lancet released figures recently where he said that the actual true toll for civilian deaths was significantly higher than that. So that will take place over the first 6 weeks. Then you get on to phase 2, which will hopefully see more hostages and the bodies of hostages who have died throughout the war that's been conducted there. Some of them, of course, were injured in the original terrible October 7th attack here in Israel when they were, where I think we'll have real problems. And this would be the third tranche of 6 weeks. Because that's when you've got to get down to the detail of what comes next. What does the future government in Gaza look like? Remember, Hamas, as well as having this military wing prescribed as a terrorist organization by the United States and the European Union and many others, it is also the legitimate elected government for many people. Now, Hamas, of course, will see themselves as part of the future. The Israeli government has drawn a very clear red line saying Hamas cannot be part of the solution. So who runs Gaza? Who does the administration? Who does the roads? Phase 2 should begin, I think around 16 days in. Those negotiations should start, and the same for phase 3 negotiations. There's so many people on both sides of the border. Families here want to see their loved ones come home, not just hostage families, but obviously the families of IDF soldiers who've been fighting inside Gaza, and they want to live in a period of peace. Now, the whole landscape has totally changed. If you decimated, excuse me, by the campaign that was orchestrated firstly by Mossad and then by the Israeli Defense Forces. Hezbollah is a shadow of its former self. Iran has lost influence there. Bashar al-Assad has fled the country, no longer runs Syria. And again, that means a loss of Iranian influence. So this axis of resistance, as it was described by the Iranians that existed, have now been reduced. But of course, Israel has to ensure that October the 7th doesn't happen again. And that is some of the detail that still needs to be hammered out, waiting for.
Yes, and what happens to those words? We have heard from Prime Minister Netanyahu time and time again that he wasn't going to stop this war until Hamas was completely eliminated. We will continue that discussion for sure, Ian. But Martha, I want to get to you. You have been to the region several times. You were there when it marked one year. Just remind us and put into perspective what these hostages have been going through and their families.
To see Gaza just a mile away from these kibbutzes, which were destroyed and so many people killed, 1,200 Israelis killed in that attack, and to know hostages, the Bermans, Gali and Ziv, who were taken from their kibbutz after trying to protect a neighbor who was also taken hostage as well. And he at the time, and this is just in October, said that he had proof of life since, but he worried terribly about what they had possibly been through. But look, I've seen Gaza as well from the sea. Remember, the Americans built that bridge, the J-Lots it called. It was a temporary bridge, and 2.6 million people, 90% of the Palestinians there have been displaced. But indeed, going back there and a reminder of that war and the reminder of the destruction there and the reminder of the terrible, horrific attack, hostage will be be released or what has happened to them, this is indeed significant progress. There may be many details still to work out in the coming months, but for now, this temporary something we've kept our eye on. But the U.S. and others have tried to get this over the line for months and months and months. We had U.S. officials, the shuttle diplomacy, working so hard, putting their heart and soul into this to try to get those hostages released and to try to get a ceasefire to help the people of Gaza. And that appears to have.
Great hope indeed. Martha, thank you so much. A statement now by the families of American hostages in Gaza on Hamas's agreement to release the hostages coming forward. Says we are deeply grateful that there is finally an agreement between Israel and Hamas to bring our loved ones, Omar, Aidan, Sagi, Ite, Keith, Gad, and Judy home. We have been waiting for 467 days while our family members suffer from life-threatening injuries, abuse, torture, and sexual violence. We thank President Biden, President-elect Trump, and you were there on the streets of Israel talking with the people. You have now moved, I understand, to just outside IDF headquarters. We're also getting word Israel attacks on the Gaza Strip are continuing right now through the night as the hostage ceasefire negotiations are just being.
You can just see it up this way, actually, Kira. Have a look up there. That's the IDF headquarters. We've been at so many demonstrations on this road. And this is, quite a familiar scene in recent months, Kira, where people just, at times they've been blocking the traffic. And actually, this is a main thoroughfare right in downtown Tel Aviv. You can see pictures. This is a picture of Keith Siegel. So 65 years old. I've met his wife, Aviva. She was a hostage. She was released. I know his brother very well. He's an American citizen. He is, I think, out of the three American hostages in Gaza who are thought to still be alive, the most likely to be released in this initial 6-week ceasefire because he is an elderly male. The other guy who hopefully will be also released, another American, I know his dad, Jonathan. I think they're all on tenterhooks still. I'm not sure, having spoken to them on text, really that this is set in immediately because they'll only really be relieved when they see their loved ones and they know 100% that they are coming out. But look, I think demonstrations. But these people are happy there's a deal, but they are worried. One person saying she has fear also because she's not confident that this first initial phase of the deal, 6-week ceasefire, 33 hostages out, most of them alive, the release of other hostages, because many of the male hostages, according to the draft framework we've seen, will not be included in this initial 6-week ceasefire in phase one of the deal. So look, a small demonstration. There is anger, and as one man said to me just now, Kira, he'll believe there's a deal when he hears the words out of the mouth of Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Kira?
Point well made, Tom, because Netanyahu has made it very clear. And we haven't heard directly from Netanyahu yet. Does that mean that is he sticking by that?
It's a very interesting question. I mean, let's just move away from the drums a bit. I think, Kira, I've spoken to advisors close to Prime Minister Netanyahu on multiple occasions over the last few months. And yes, militarily degrading Hamas, continuing to do so, has been one of their objectives. And an objective they have stuck by time and time again when a ceasefire deal was looking possible in the future. Is Hamas going to be completely eradicated after this 6-week ceasefire? No. There will be people affiliated with Hamas. Hamas is a terror organization in the eyes of Israel, the US, many other Western nations. But it was very deeply integrated into the fabric of Gazan society. That it was not just a military organization. So it has been greatly weakened in recent months, weeks. We know its leader, Yahya Sinwar, was killed in October. But his brother, we believe, has effectively replaced him. So I think, another key thing to bear in mind, and we've been getting word in the last few minutes about this, Kira, is one of Israel's key red lines was that they would keep Israeli troops in that strip of land, which basically runs along permanent presence there to make sure that weaponry is not smuggled back into Gaza. It looks like the Israeli government have got their way on that. Hamas has not ultimately budged on that. The Israeli government in the last few minutes was saying Hamas tried to basically up their demands on that issue at the last minute, and ultimately they claim Hamas back down. But, you know, I think what's definitely clear is the Israeli government and Hamas have both made important concessions, and ultimately that's why we've got a deal to...
Let's get straight to the White House. Karen Travers, our White House correspondent. So, Karen, we do know that Steve Witkoff, the special envoy to the Middle East, that President-elect Trump has appointed, was involved in the negotiations here. We are seeing all over, of course, Truth Social, the president-elect talking about this deal and how the transition team has been involved. What do we know about the president, President Biden, and the administration, and how the both ingoing and outgoing presidents have worked through this deal together?
Kira, the White House says they have been working very closely with the incoming Trump administration on this deal to try to get it across the finish line. Now, working so closely with the Trump team, as you mentioned, Steve Witkoff, the president-elect's advisor and envoy to the Middle East, has been involved in these conversations that are happening in the region, working with the Biden team to get this done. Now, we haven't gotten an official statement yet from the Biden White House, but we do anticipate hearing from the president very soon once they have official word of the details of all of this, that he will come out and talk. Kira, it's hard to overstate how big of a priority this has been for President Biden and his team since October 7th. He has been working and his team around the clock to try to get the release of these hostages, to secure a ceasefire, the suffering of the Palestinian people there. The president has been on the phone over the last couple of days talking to key leaders in the region, including the Israeli Prime Minister and the leaders of Qatar and Egypt, to try and get this deal across. Kira, it was striking to hear from the president and his national security advisor, Jake Sullivan, on Monday, expressing significant optimism that a deal was close. Both the president and Jake Sullivan used the phrase "on the brink" to talk about these negotiations and the potential of reaching a ceasefire and hostage release deal. Kira, you know, of course, that they have been close before, only to see a deal fall apart. Officials have always been very cautious to not get too ahead of things and be too optimistic, but Monday, even Jake Sullivan, who's notably a bit of a pessimist, did say that this was between the two sides were closing, they were getting removed, and also because, as he said, the Israelis had seen significant, substantial military objectives achieved in Gaza, and that's why they were able to get to this point right now. Kira?
Karen, thank you. And hopefully we will hear from President Biden soon. If indeed he does take remarks or make remarks, we will take that live from the White House. Ian, looking forward to just the future government of Gaza. What is Hamas saying now? I know they put out a statement within the last 45 minutes. A lot of questions surrounding their state of mind, its state of mind at this point, and the future of what a government would look like in Gaza moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, interesting, their statement doesn't go on to what I've already described as a very kind of hot potato in negotiations between the two sides. The statement that they've released obviously emphasizes the points that they want to make to their own supporters, and I think when we see Prime Minister Netanyahu, he will also try and stress elements and stress that it was Hamas who made concessions, not the Israeli side. The truth is that both sides have had to make some kind of concessions in this, but yeah, the thorny issue of his government that it's totally unacceptable for Hamas to continue to exist. Well, I think the reality on the ground is they do still exist, and they will probably continue to exist. The key question is, do they also continue to be the elected government? That's what they are at the moment, as well as this military group, this terrorist organization, according to so many countries. So that's a problem that they're just going to have to resolve. And that's why I think as we go through this process, although there is well-grounded optimism optimism, not least because everybody needs an alleviation to the suffering, the end of this state of war psychologically for Israelis and Palestinians alike. That will be a huge relief and very important. But, you know, while I'm talking to you, the Israelis' bombing of Gaza is still ongoing, although we're seeing pictures from Gaza City of people coming out and celebrating. There are agreed upon. The Israeli Security Cabinet is going to meet first thing tomorrow morning. Then it has to go to the full cabinet to be ratified. Then there is a 48-hour window which allows for legal objections, and that will be handled by the Israeli Supreme Court. Only after that will day one of phase one actually begin, and hopefully the bombing will stop. But it is a temporary ceasefire at the moment. Hopefully this is the beginning of the end, but we're just going to have to wait and see how that pans out. I also think, you know, there's been a lot of pressure being brought to bear, not just by the Trump team, but also by the Biden team. We know that President Trump threatened that all hell would break loose. Now, that comment obviously was seen as being directed towards the Hamas side, but it also applies to the Israeli side as well. We've seen peak up of the government, in other words, their strength to hold the government hostage, and one of those ministers tweeted about this today, that he, together with his alliance, had effectively scuttled any attempt to broker peace that's been going on for months and months now. You know, if you look at the detail of what we're now seeing, this is looking very the change in the political makeup of the government and the parties that support Netanyahu's coalition government. But also part of it is the pressure that was being brought to bear by the Trump administration, the incoming Trump administration, as well as the Biden team. It's interesting how closely they've worked together on this, sending one single message to the Israeli government and to Hamas to wrap this up, get it as the Israeli military pulls out. So the political landscape has changed. I think, excuse me, the threats from President-elect Trump have certainly made a difference, as has the persistence of the Biden administration. I think a lot of sides will rightly claim credit for this, the brokering of the negotiations by Qatar, the involvement of Egypt. President Sisi and his team have also been heavily involved. Of course, a lot of the aid will have to go in through Egypt, and we're now starting to see signs that Egypt is all on with this deal from when it's implemented. So looking at the timetable at the moment, we're on Wednesday. It seems possible that by this weekend we could be seeing the first tranche of hostages. Again, remember, it's only going to be 3 at a time in exchange for a much larger number of Palestinian prisoners. That's controversial also for many people here. Although most Israelis will be relieved by this, there'll be many who feel that this is a sellout, that they should have continued to totally crush Hamas, even if that meant that the terrible situation that the hostages in would deteriorate even further. We know that 33 hostages are part of this original agreement, but it's not clear how many of them are still alive. There will be bodies, there will be bad news for some of the families, and the pain and the suffering that they've had to endure since October the 7th, 2023 will not be coming to an end anytime soon. But of course, people are being optimistic. But again, I think for the families of the hostages, they feel there's been many false dawns, many moments where they hoped that their loved ones would be released. There are names out there, but it's not official at the moment. We should see those names.
Trump factor there. We have not heard from President Joe Biden or the White House yet. We are hoping to get remarks soon. We will bring that to you live. We are also waiting to hear from Qatar and the negotiators there in Doha that helped this deal come together. They are part of the negotiations. I will say, though, that he is taking credit for the agreement. He says this epic ceasefire agreement could have only happened as a result of our historic victory in November, as it signaled to the entire world that my administration would seek peace and negotiate deals to ensure the safety of all Americans and our allies. I am thrilled American and Israeli hostages will be returning home to be reunited with their families and their loved ones. Again, we are waiting for word out of the White House, and we'll bring that to you live as soon as that happens. Let's bring in former Senior Director of Counterterrorism at the National Security Council, Javed Ali. Javed, Hamas clearly has agreed to this deal. We have made the statement several times, but can you really trust a terrorist group?
So, Karen, nice to be with you. And based on a lot of the points that have been raised already over the past 30 minutes in your segment, yes, Hamas is going to continue to exist as a terrorist group. And pre-October 7th, its assessed strength was about 30,000 fighters under arms, give or take. Now, but no one really knows how much of that 30,000 person strength it remains. There's still probably at least several thousand, if not more. And now we have a new leader, Mohammed Sinwar, Yahya Sinwar's brother. Is he more aggressive, less aggressive than his brother? We don't know the answer to that. Obviously, he also entered into this deal too. So a lot of questions about Hamas as an organization. How will it continue to operate going forward? Will it try to just be more of a political organization?
Moving forward, then, I know there's a lot of questions that remain unanswered, but just the future of a government in Gaza, as you mentioned, that Hamas party. This is the leaders that have been ruling Gaza now. Netanyahu has said that the war would not stop until he eliminated Hamas. What do you see happening here as a deal moves forward?
Well, it looks like the deal right now has Hamas still being part of the future of the Gaza Strip, unless there's another aspect of this that isn't clear to any of an authority that only controls the West Bank. Will they have a future role in the Gaza Strip in addition to Hamas, or will they completely supplant Hamas? And what does that mean? Well, I have a hard time believing Hamas is just going to lay down their arms and not try to reemerge as even some kind of political entity in the Gaza Strip. What is the prospect for any other international body to come in and help with governance in the Gaza Strip? It's not clear right now. And so for the time being, it looks like Hamas will still have a major hand in the post-ceasefire landscape that's going to emerge.
Javed Ali, sure appreciate your insight. Thank you all for joining us. We will continue coverage here of the breaking news, a deal finally, including live remarks from the President of the United States. We'll be right back.
I have to find a babysitter.
I could ask a friend, but
I have a lot of questions. Are they background checked?
Can I check reviews? What's their rate? Availability?
How's their dress-up game? Can they handle all this? I got one.
Yes!
Yay!
Find a sitter today, care.com.
Something serious about to happen. I have an idea.
You guys have eyes on your targets.
Shouldn't we strategize?
Come on, we're gonna improvise. Freestyle.
No.
This is ABC.
Here at Columbia University.
Here in downtown Port-au-Prince.
Let's go.
ABC News Live, America's #1 streaming news. Anytime, anywhere. Streaming 24/7, straight to you for free.
Thank you for making ABC News Live America's #1 streaming news.
After more than 15 months of fighting, a breakthrough in the war in Gaza. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Kira Phillips. Israel and Hamas agreeing on the core elements of a ceasefire deal. A source telling us Israel will convene its Security Cabinet tomorrow to actually approve the deal. We have team coverage, Ian Panel, and also our foreign correspondent, Tom Supi-Burridge, joining us both from Tel Aviv, our Martha Raddatz, Chief Global Affairs Correspondent, White House Correspondent Karen Travers as well, and and Selena Wang, whoever also covers the White House for us from Mar-a-Lago. Ian, let's start with you and sort of recap this deal, which came through just within the past hour, and the various phases, and what this means for the hostages.
Yeah, I think by and large we can say a deal has been done, a deal is there, but there are still small details that need to be worked out on the Israeli side. As you said, the Security Cabinet is going to meet tomorrow, so the process that has to be gone through is it goes to the Security Cabinet, then the wider Cabinet, then there's a period of 2 days where legal objections can be raised through the courts, and that may well happen because not everyone is happy with this agreement. What it actually looks like on the ground is 3 phases, each phase 6 weeks long. Phase 1 starts with a relocation of Israeli troops, allowing people in Gaza to return to their homes, and this phased process of hostages, alive or dead, being released, being sent back to Israel. So the first phase, day 1, should start with 3 hostages being released. We don't know the names. There are some names out there, but that's not part of an official list, in exchange for a much larger number of Palestinian prisoners. Hamas is talking about over 1,000 Palestinian prisoners being released, and we believe that 33 hostages should be released within this first phase of the agreement. There are then 2 more phases. The details of phase 2 will have to be negotiated while phase 1 is being implemented, and similarly the details of phase 3, which is going to have some of the thorniest issues to resolve, should all of Israeli troops from Gaza, if indeed that happens. And as I've been saying, the thorniest issue of all, of course, is deciding who runs Gaza after. You know, what happens on day 1? The Israeli government has been very clear that it will not accept Hamas as the government in Gaza. Remember, as well as a military wing, it has a political wing, and that political wing was elected by a majority of Palestinians in Gaza. So who runs Gaza is going to be the thorniest issue. But I think most importantly, it will bring immediate relief to suffering of the Palestinians inside Gaza, which is almost beyond description. Fairly complete across the country. Many people have lost their homes. The hospital, the medical service has been totally decimated. The humanitarian crisis and medical crisis is extreme. So there's a lot of work to be done. Again, crucially, I think, at the start of phase 1 is the opening of the border crossing, especially the one with Egypt, that will allow humanitarian relief to come in. One might expect that the Qataris will play a leading role, certainly in reconstruction. It's something that they've done before, but everyone is going to have to be very careful. Israel cannot afford to have a repetition of what happened on October the 7th, 2023. In some senses, it punctured this belief that Israel was a safe place for Jews. And the total landscape across the Middle East has been transformed as all assaults, terrible, terrible events that shocked this country to the core. And so Israel has to recover its footing as well. But we're also going to see a lot of hostage families. We've seen them out on the streets. They're all, of course, hoping and praying that their loved ones will be returned. They're hoping and praying that they're alive. Many just don't know whether they're going to see a relative, a loved one, or they're going to be handed back a body. But it will mean some closure, and hopefully by the end of these 3 phases, you will then see the return of all the bodies and those who were captured alive. And then there are communities across this country that also need to be rebuilt. The kibbutzim that were down by the border, that were kind of idyllic, bucolic, rural communities, peaceful communities, they have to rebuild. Most people haven't been able to go back to their homes, not just here, but also in the north of the country. But we've seen many of the dominoes of Israel's enemies who are lined up, backed by Iran, fall. Hezbollah is a shadow of itself. We saw its leadership decimated. The organization is far weaker than it was. And because of what happened in Syria with the overthrow of Bashar al-Assad, it means that this so-called sheer crescent, this axis of resistance, has been broken. And that's really important. And I think also, psychologically, Israel has shown that it won't tolerate these kind of threats on its borders, that it has to have guarantees of security. Otherwise, it undermines the whole precept of the state of Israel. So these are the things that are going on. A lot of moving parts, but I think the immediate reaction, we've seen people celebrating in Gaza, and we've seen people out on the streets here also celebrating, is one of relief. People want the soldiers home. People want to go back to their homes. People want normal life to resume again. Everyone's been living in this strange state of suspense over the last few months, and it's been difficult for people on all sides, but especially inside Gaza. That's where most of the relief is going to have to go immediately. But look, while we're talking, the bombing is still continuing. This hasn't started yet. We're expecting it in the next few days.
Ian, thank you. Tom, let's get back to you. You've been spending a lot of time with family members of the hostages. I understand you do have a member with you right now. The floor is yours.
Yeah, thanks, Kira. Look, I mean, the demonstration down here just outside the IDF headquarters is over, but we're going to talk about Afir Calderon. You can see his smiling face there. He's 54 years old. He's a hostage held in Gaza for more than a year, a father of four taken from the Nir Oz kibbutz on October 7th. And we're going to talk to his cousin, Ifat Calderon. Ifat, thanks for talking to us. Let's get your reaction. What is your overriding feeling now that you know that there is this deal for an initial 6-week ceasefire and the release of 33 hostages in place?
It's really complicated feelings because I'm happy for the 33 that's supposed to come back. I don't know if Ofer is still alive or not.
Okay.
I do believe he is, but I don't know.
It must be so hard.
Yeah, it is. And as you said, the 4 children that are waiting for him at home. It's not done till it's done. Like, if we're not going to get back all of the hostages alive and the dead ones, we haven't done anything.
Is it that you won't believe that he's going to be freed until you literally see him in the flesh and you've got 100% confirmation?
Yes.
So are you still sort of full with anxiety and on tenterhooks tonight, even though we've got this major news that there is this deal?
Yes, I do. It's like I'm really trying to to look at the big picture, but not to get more, I'm not relaxed. I'm not until I'm going to see him. It's like, and each of the hostages, I'm fighting here for more than a year with beautiful people and families that of the hostages. We fight to stop this war. For so long time ago, we started this, and to bring back home the hostages to the deal.
Sure. And I think what's really important to point out is that you and the other protesters who were out on the streets blocking the traffic with a candlelit vigil just moments ago,
yes.
I mean, you want your loved ones to come home, you want Afir out and free, but you also want an end to the war. You've been calling on that for months, haven't you?
Yes, I think it should have been. We've got so many soldiers that died during this war.
Israeli soldiers killed in the war.
Yes, and also the military pressure that also we got hostages that could have come alive. They're gonna, they came. We got bodies, and so it's another thing.
The hostages killed in captivity and the human suffering of Palestinians in Gaza.
Exactly. Yeah, the innocent Gaza people, citizens that haven't done anything, and they also it's catastrophic.
It is absolutely devastating to see what's happened to so many civilians in Gaza. Well, I mean, just going back to tonight's deal, this major announcement. How confident are you that Afir, if he is alive, will be included in the deal? Because he's aged 54, so that would suggest as an elderly male, he would be one of those included as the 33. Are you confident that that will be the case at all?
No, I'm not going to. I'm not. As you said, until I'm going to see him, I'm not confident in anything. I don't believe anything. Even if I'm going to see him on the list, until I'm going to see, as the same as with his children that came back after 52 days.
Yeah, because his children, 2 of his children were taken captive also by Hamas, and they were freed in the initial deal in November and December of 2023. And they suffered a lot while they were in Gaza. What is it like? What's the last year been like for you and them, knowing that Afir has just been in there, and we've had so many false dawns, haven't we? We've been here at these protests, I've seen them time and time again. What's it been like the last few months, knowing that someone so close to you is being held in very, very difficult conditions?
Personally, I felt like I'm fighting against my government, my prime minister, that's supposed to bring them back so long time ago. And each time there was a deal on the table, he chose his coalition. I'm calling it a bloody coalition because I blame them on each hostage that came back home and will come back home dead. They're responsible to this.
You believe they have blood on their hands?
Yes, the blood is on their hands.
Of the hostages killed in captivity?
Yes, exactly. Yeah, on the pressure, the military pressure, as I said, I blame the government, the prime minister. He could have brought them back so long time ago to save so many lives. Instead of that, we just got bodies and the lucky of the hostages now is Trump, because I can't see them coming back if not Trump.
Do you feel that President-elect Trump has been an important force added into the pressure both on Hamas but also potentially on the Israeli government?
Yes, I do believe that. I do believe that Trump is responsible to this deal. Yeah, he said whenever I'm going to go on the 20th of January when I'm going in start my.
When he's inaugurated, when he becomes president, yeah.
Yes. So I want to see all the hostages home. So we're not going to see all the hostages.
Yeah. He threatened that all hell could break loose,
yes,
whatever
exactly.
that would mean.
Yes, exactly. So I believe that Netanyahu is more afraid from Trump because till now he was afraid from his coalition, can't say parties.
Yeah, his coalition partners. You believe he was worried about his government collapsing because of hardliners not being happy about a potential deal in the past.
Yes. He was afraid from them. He was afraid that. He was afraid more to his coalition than the hostages.
And have you had any contact from the Israeli government tonight, your family at all, about what's been agreed?
No.
Do you think you'll be contacted by them? Would you like to be contacted by them? And how do you see the next few hours and days playing out?
It's going to be a hell of a stress for all of us.
Yeah, of course.
And I can't see the whole picture until I'm going to see everybody's home.
It must be it must be so hard, and you must struggle to get us to sleep at night thinking about the fear and the other hostages and wondering and hoping that he is going to be freed as this part of the deal.
Hopefully he's going to be free on this deal, and hopefully he's going to be alive.
Yeah, we really hope he is.
We're going to be here every day.
You're going to keep protesting even though there's this deal?
Until we will get them all back. We're going to be here every day at 6:30 in the evening, and on Saturdays we're here at 8 o'clock. It's so important.
Well, you're an impressive woman. I would think you're a very impressive cousin, and look, we really hope he comes back to you, and we hope as many of the hostages and their families are reunited in the coming days and weeks, and maybe even months ahead. So, Ifat, thank you very much for talking to us tonight. Thank you very much for giving us that initial reaction. So that really is, I think, for us, the first reaction we've had from a relative of a hostage in Gaza. Ifat speaking very, very bravely. Out of the streets time and time again, pressuring the Israeli government to try and make them go for concessions, Kira. And ultimately, I think it is the case that both sides have ultimately made concessions, and that is really, the fundamental reason why there is a deal tonight. Kira?
I sure hope we see Ofer come home, and just listening to his cousin there and all the compassion for the innocent Palestinian people, too, and the lives lost there. Heartwarming, beautiful interview. Tom, thank you so much. Straight to Doha now. Qatar's Prime Minister delivering remarks on the ceasefire deal they helped negotiate between Israel and Hamas. Let's listen in.
Which will allow for the swap of prisoners as well as the swap of remains and the return of the displaced people to their residences. This will also facilitate the travel of wounded and sick people in order to receive treatment. Phase 1 also includes an increased flow of relief and humanitarian aid to all parts of the Gaza Strip, as well as the rehabilitation of hospitals, health centers, bakeries, and allowing the entry of fuel and civil defense equipment, as well as basic necessities for displaced people who lost their houses as a result of the war. In phase 1, Hamas will be releasing 33 Israeli captives, including civilian women and female recruits, as well as children, elderly people, as well as civilian ill people and wounded, in return for a number of prisoners who are being held in Israeli prisons. Regarding phases 2 and 3, the details will be finalized during the implementation of phase 1. The state of Qatar reaffirms the necessity of both sides committing to the implementation of all 3 stages of the agreement in order to prevent civilian bloodshed and in order to shield our region from the consequences of this conflict and ensure that we have lasting peace in the region. Qatar will continue its joint efforts with the Arab Republic of Egypt and the United States of America to ensure that all sides are following through with their commitments and engagements and ensure that all 3 stages will be implemented. We look forward to seeing regional and international efforts coming together in order to assist with relief and humanitarian aid and supporting the United Nations in its attempts to enter aid into the Gaza Strip. Qatar will spare no effort to offer help to the families in the Gaza Strip and doing everything that's necessary to alleviate the suffering of the residents of the Strip. Since October 8th, we in the state of Qatar saved no effort with the constant under the constant and watchful eye of His Highness Sheikh Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani. We worked day and night in order to reach this moment. And since our mediation efforts succeeded last November to guarantee the release of 109 hostages in return for a number of Palestinian prisoners, we have been working continuously in order to prevent bloodshed and put an end to the war machine and restore hope for our region in a prosperous future that will allow our people to dream of a better future. For 411 days, meetings and contacts continued with our partners and both sides of the conflict until we reached this long-awaited moment today. However, today begins a responsibility for both sides who will be supported by the international community and the mediators in order to achieve complete success. And this is what we will be focusing on in the coming days and weeks. I would also like to express our thanks to all our partners in the region and internationally for their support to our efforts all the way until we reach this deal. And in conclusion, I would also like to remind our brothers in the Gaza Strip that Qatar will continue to offer support to our brothers in Palestine and that this happens under the close watch and the watchful eye of His Highness Sheikh Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani, day and night, hour by hour and minute by minute. We would like to tell them we give thanks to Allah for bringing us to this moment today, and hopefully this will be the last page in the days of the war. We would also like to call upon all sides to fully commit to all the articles of this agreement and to continue implementing these procedures and measures in accordance with the agreement. The state of Qatar will continue working jointly with its partners in order to make sure that this deal is implemented in full and that calm returns to the Gaza Strip in a sustainable manner, and we will never give up the people of Gaza. Thank you. First question, Sky News.
Hakim from Sky News. Congratulations. This is a huge moment. You, as you say, have been working on this deal for many months. And the question is, why now? Why this moment? And was it pressure from the incoming Trump administration that got it over the line? Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Hilda, for this question. Actually, we've been raising the question of the right moment for the entire period since the collapse of the first phase. But we have seen a momentum that started to build in the last month, and we kept pushing for that, working together very closely with our partners. And I can say that what we have seen, in the past few days, seeing a collaboration transcending both administration was a clear demonstration for the commitment of the U.S. to reach to that deal. And I really would like to thank both the envoys who are here with us in the last couple of days, and they played a vital role in reaching to this moment. And of course, for us and Egypt, this is something that we are a stakeholder in that conflict, that we have to do it and we have to help and support. But we have seen the steps that's been taken recently from the US has yielded to this moment.
CNN.
Very much indeed, and to Steve Witkoff, who is Becky Anderson from CNN. Congratulations to you, and to Steve Witkoff, who is also here in the room. How much confidence do you have that the deal will progress beyond phase one, sir?
Well, we have faith, Becky, that brought us to this moment, and I think that's the most important part, that we are committed. We will continue to do everything we can, everything possible, together with our partners, to ensure that this deal is implemented as it's agreed, and this deal will bring us peace, hopefully, at the end of it. I believe that it all depends on the parties of the agreement and acting in good faith in that agreement in order to ensure that no collapse happening to that deal.
Can I just follow up? What mechanisms are in place to ensure that neither side breaks the ceasefire?
There is a follow-up mechanism that Egypt, Qatar and US are going to handle. It will be placed in Cairo, and this follow-up actually will be a joint team from the three countries that will monitor the implementation of the agreement, and everything is being agreed upon and will be in place hopefully on the day of the execution.
Thank you.
Reuters.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Congratulations, Andrew Mills from Reuters. Can you talk a little bit more about this follow-up mechanism? If elements of the agreement put in place tonight are violated, what will happen? Who is it that is going to report and that a violation has happened, and how will that violation be communicated to the parties, the world, the guarantors of this agreement? Thank you.
Well, this is what I have just mentioned to Becky. There will be a follow-up mechanism that all the parties will be placed in Egypt, and they will follow up the implementation of the agreement. There will be a reporting mechanism for any violation, and those violations will be addressed at a very early stage. Look, we expect from the parties to adhere to the agreement. We expect the parties to stay committed to what they have committed themselves to in that agreement. But we know that these kind of agreements are very complex and will have some issues down the line. And we are ready, and we will stay committed to address those issues ahead of time.
And Prime Minister, just as a follow-up, the last truce that was in place in November 2023 did fall apart on the 8th day. What has changed in this agreement that will ensure that this has less likely to fall apart than that agreement was?
Well, the agreement on the agreement in November was very transactional, so it was like a day by day. But this agreement has a clear mechanism for the first 42 days, and there's a clear mechanism to negotiate phase 2 and 3, and all the details of the agreement will be published in the next couple of days once the details are finalized.
الرابع والأخير قناة الجزيرة العربية.
Your Excellency, Adnan Bourina from Al Jazeera. Question number 1. Do you think that this agreement will lead to a permanent ceasefire? In other words, do you believe the guarantees are strong enough to ensure that Israel will commit to all articles of the agreement? Question 2. Between today and Sunday, what will the situation be like in the Gaza Strip? And question 3, if you allow me, what contributed to the success of the mediation this time around, and what did Qatar offer this time, and what will Qatar's... Read the questions again. Question number 1, do you believe that this time the deal will lead to a permanent ceasefire? All right, wait here, and then you'll ask the other questions later. Regarding the implementation of this agreement, first off, Like I said, the implementation depends upon the parties as well as the goodwill of
President
the
Joe
parties.
Biden
And
now
this is
about
what
to
we are
speak
hoping.
from the White House on this deal. Let's take it straight to our network programming.
Might be released in this first wave. Again, there's quite a bit of reporting still to come on these numbers, but again, it's believed at least 2 Americans will be released early on in this exchange. Israel will release hundreds of Palestinian prisoners. Israel will also pause fighting so desperately needed aid can get into Gaza. Credit, and was given credit by the Qataris just moments ago, his envoy who is there, the president-elect's envoy joining the Biden team. The White House has been working closely with President-elect Trump as well, the Mideast negotiator, to help broker the deal in these final days of the Biden administration, and now just days before President-elect Donald Trump is inaugurated. I want to go to Mary Brucey's.
David, the president has been working tirelessly for months for this very moment, hoping that he would be able to come here and announce that a deal has finally been reached before he leaves office. Now, in a statement just moments ago, the president celebrating this deal, saying he is thrilled for those who have been held hostage, that they will now be reunited in their efforts to get this done. He said that it is a result not only of the extreme pressure that Hamas has been under, but also the changed regional equation, citing that ceasefire in Lebanon and the weakening of Iran. David.
Mary, thank you. You can see President Biden, Vice President Harris, Secretary of State Blinken. Let's listen to the president.
It's a very good afternoon, because at long last, I can announce a ceasefire and a hostage deal has been reached between Israel and Hamas. More than 15 months of conflict that began with Hezbollah's brutal massacre on October the 7th, by the innocent people of Gaza. Fighting in Gaza will stop, and soon the hostages will return home to their families. The elements of this deal were what I laid out in detail this past May, which was embraced by countries around the world and endorsed overwhelmingly by the UN Security Council. The deal is structured in 3 phases. Phase 1 will last 6 weeks. It includes a full and complete ceasefire, withdrawal of Israeli forces from all the populated areas of Gaza, and the release of a number of hostages held by Hamas, including women and elderly and the wounded. And I'm proud to say Americans will be part of that hostage release in Phase 1 as well. And the Vice President and I cannot wait to welcome them home. In exchange, all the areas of Gaza. And the surge of humanitarian assistance into Gaza will begin. And the innocent people can have a greater access to these vital supplies. You know, during the next 6 weeks, Israel will negotiate the necessary arrangements to get Phase 2, which is a permanent end